the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
That's wrong, they say.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
That's wrong, they say.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this, sir.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to... Hannah just lost her page again. Good grief. Here we go. Sorry. I had closed a tab, and as soon as I start talking, it opened back up again. But hello and welcome to HBR Talk 255. Why should we care about TikTok? I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator, Lauren Brooks. And we're going to talk about a problem with TikTok that is disproportionately affecting boys and why the malware site is being addressed in ways by the government that aren't going to help. But first we got to do...
Are you kidding me, Hannah?
Yeah, the government's
really?
doing something wrong again.
You're lying. The government's going to... Seriously? You're pulling my leg, right?
Yeah. Oh, very much so. This is just like, this is everything that comes up. This is bad, but what the government's doing is worse. You know, like it's not worse. It's bad in a different way in this case, because there's nothing worse than death. But and yeah, Richard Beer brings up a point already. Some of this stuff is already on Tumblr, so Tumblr is just as bad in a lot of ways, and we really could see that when we saw the great Tumblr exodus into Twitter, which kind of ruined Twitter. But yeah, we'll get into that as we read the article a little bit. One thing that I'll point out is this is not the only article, but I mean, Breitbart is a right-wing site, so some of the left-wingers in the audience might not like me reading it, but they were very fair to us during our court hearing and everything. So there's at least, you know, a tendency to be interested in what's going on and cover it. So, yeah, getting on to, you know, obviously we got to do what we got to do before we get into the rest of the discussion. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters, at least, to switch their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on social media platforms' tip jars, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justatip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the Thought Police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And with that, let's get into the article. There are links in the low bar to of the video to this article, to also the Electronic Frontier Foundation's article on the Restrict Act, which is what Congress is doing in regard to TikTok's malware behavior. And then there's also a link to the bill itself, because I think if you're going to really react to the bill, you should be able to find the text. And the link to the bill, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, has a way to contact your representatives as well. The Breitbart article does reference specifically the Vice article that originally published some of this information, but we're not going to get into the Vice article. It's very similar. One big difference is obviously Vice, being left-wing source, refers to incels as extremists having a virulently, literally treating it like it's infectious, virulently misogynistic culture. So I don't think we saw that in the Breitbart article. So, typical Vice. So we're going to discuss this in terms of whether it's real or, boomers are overreacting, or somewhere in between, whether it's panic mongering, what it means for boys in particular, because boys are more vulnerable in a lot of ways to suicide suggestions, and that's one of the big things. That's what's being promoted, and how it's being politically exploited, because this is a more complicated issue than TikTok promotes suicide, TikTok bad, ban TikTok. I hate TikTok. I will say that right now. That's another full disclosure. If TikTok vanished from the entire internet everywhere today, I'd have a party. I would be happy camper. But I don't. I also, if government vanished everywhere from all over the world today, I would also have a party. So
yes, that would be a real reason to party.
Yeah. So my position on this is going to be weird.
Yeah, no, I have never used. I knew what it was as soon as it came out. I've never used TikTok. And just even watching it on certain links, I think they can still get certain information from you, even if you just watch a TikTok video. So I just don't click on any of that crap. And it's really just all superficial, narcissistic bullshit anyway. I don't. I mean, I guess it's good because there's some really good things to talk about and laugh at and point at,
Yeah.
But outside of that, it just seems like a machine to just feed people's egos and waste time.
Yeah, well, and we can point out something that Brian pointed out, actually, that I think was very astute, that social media is kind of like an MMORPG for women.
Yes.
It's very gamified, and you win by getting the most attention and being the most popular and canceling the most people sometimes, because you see a lot of what people refer to as cancel culture, which basically is just cry bullying. Cancel culture is cry bullying. There's nothing new about it. It's been done forever. But in any case, all of this, it's not new. Instagram has been called out for it. Facebook has been called out for it. MySpace was called out for it. LiveJournal, for the old farts out there, was called out for it. And for the really old farts, Usenet and BBSs were called out for it. You didn't see a whole lot of it, but people got into conflicts in those areas and chat rooms and like pretty much this is not new. What's new is the use of algorithms to create content promotion patterns. And TF is LiveJournal. Ha! LiveJournal was one of the earlier blog sites, and it was mostly filled with, I took this really stupid quiz about what kind of anime character are you. This is my results. Now y'all have to take the quiz and tell me what your results are. Like, it was incredibly girly.
I remember those.
Yeah. My friends, all had LiveJournals, so I started one, and mine had stuff like that on it because that's how I interacted with my friends that had it and everything. But it also had like posts about politics and stuff, and they're like, "Why are you writing about this?" Because it's who I am. You just deal with it. So I've been doing this for a long time. But yeah, in terms of TikTok, where it's genuinely insidious is, and this is something that I think a lot of commentators have got backward as well. It appeals to the Zoomer generation's short attention span, Richard Bier asks, what was the video capability of the BBS systems again? Okay, so before I get into this, I'm not gonna get into this a lot. This we're talking about a long time ago, so we're not talking about major video capability. You weren't able to necessarily post, like, you wouldn't have found videos like TikTok. It was all text. It was all like you used BB code to put in italics and bold print and stuff like that. And if you could put in if somebody had a video or a sound file that they had downloaded, and you could put in links. So people could download things to their computer and watch them. You could, I don't think BB Code was where we did that. That was in chat rooms. You could play sounds that were on other people's computer for them. You had commands for that. So this is very different. It didn't have that kind of capability, at least not where I was. So I don't even know if there was much. I don't think you could really watch videos online back then. But I mean, at that time, you were either dialing directly to in your modem. You were dialing directly to the website that the bulletin board system was on, or the server that the bulletin board system was on. The computer, basically. You were dialing the other person's computer. Or when services came along like AOL, you were paying something like $2.50 a minute to be on the internet. So you didn't do like anything that you would have to buffer or take time to. You just you composed what you were gonna post, and you got on and you posted it or you sent it. Yeah, you could download a file from a software library, part of the BBS computer. But yeah, you didn't spend a whole lot of time actually connected if you dialed long distance or if you were using a service, because it was expensive. And then you play it back later. You watched it later. You didn't. But once AOL went unlimited, and then other services came along and so on, that changed, and people started using chat rooms and stuff like that extensively, and then you'd have those files, usually sound files, not video files. So like I used to have a whole set of things like that. But that's all getting into technical stuff that really isn't relevant to the show and is so long. We're talking 1993, 94, 95, 96, like not something that would be relevant to today.
Almost 30 years ago. Jeez.
I'm old.
I'm old too. Shit. I know. I remember 95.
I get called a boomer on Twitter all the time, which is inaccurate. I'm a Gen Xer. Like, we don't exist, but yeah, you and I, we don't exist. We like, they go straight from Gen X, straight from boomer to zoomer, and they skip Gen X and Gen Y, right? So yeah, and like, it was back in the day, in the stone ages of the internet, when you had to pedal your computer to keep it.
Yeah.
No, we didn't do that. I'm just kidding, guys. That's not real. Just in case any Zoomers are listening. There was this thing called a floppy disk that wasn't actually floppy. So, getting into this article, my basic point going over this is the situation is going to be more complex than the article is going to tell us, and the way the government is dealing with it is, as always, not going to directly address any of the problems that it's supposed to address, but it will give the government more power. All right, so
because that's what they need.
Yeah. The Chinese apps, it's talking about TikTok, right? It only takes 10 minutes after creating an account on China's TikTok app for the platform's algorithm to begin pushing suicide videos to 13-year-old children.
What?
That's their catchline. Now, this is the other thing, and I think I better point this out as well, because before we go in any further, YouTube uses an algorithm, Twitter uses an algorithm, Facebook uses an algorithm. I think Instagram probably does too. I don't really get into Instagram all that much. Don't worry, August Lion. I still have old floppy disks too. I have pretty much every type of media that's out there. I still upstairs in our little storage area, I have a Macintosh SE. An old Macintosh SE that I bought in 1991 or 92. So there you go. We don't still have the Commodore 64 we used to have, though, because that fried itself.
Oh man.
Those things didn't have a fan, so if you weren't really careful, it would do that. And I blame Pool of Radiance. It's not my fault that I got addicted to the game. But anyway, so what I want to point out here with the algorithms is they all claim that the algorithms are controlled by user engagement. So basically, if you watch a lot of one type of video, it shows you more of that type of video. If you engage with a certain set of people, it shows you more of what they are posting and everything. And the upside of that is that you see more of what you have shown that you're interested in. The downside of that is it traps you in a rut. Because if you want to see other things and it's only promoting what you've already looked at, like I have on my YouTube account that I use to just watch YouTube videos, half of the videos that it promotes to me are videos that I've already seen. And I have to go through and click out of it, don't promote this, I've already seen it, like all the time because of that. And, the same thing with Twitter. I have to tell Twitter that I want to see people I'm following, not what Twitter recommends for me, because it'll recommend the people that comment to me the most, and I answer them. And that's feminist, and I really don't give a shit what they have to say. I want to hear what my friends have to say. So if I want to see what other people are posting... Now, there is some discussion about TikTok that the app promotes things whether it's what you've watched or not. And I wonder, it might be that it's promoting stuff based on politics or based on how it wants Americans to be. But I think we do have a habit, especially, I think the Zoomer generation, there's a segment of the Zoomer generation that has a habit of watching like the most mindless shit they can get their hands on. And like 30-second long videos imitating boomers or making fun of each other and stuff like that. And I don't think it's necessarily China that's promoting that. I think that's an us problem, not a them problem. But it's possible. I mean, it is possible. So just my little disclaimer. I'm not sure it's 100% that this is being promoted as much as maybe we're seeing a problem within the Zoomer generation that TikTok is exposing that we should be paying attention to. So I'll go on from here. The Chinese app's recommendation algorithm is so advanced that within 10 minutes it will start pushing suicide videos if the young TikTok user suggests he is sexually frustrated, according to research published Tuesday by corporate accountability group. I think this is just pronounced Echo, and shared by Vice News.
How do you determine if he's sexually frustrated?
Well, that's what's coming up.
Ooh.
The researchers set up 9 different TikTok accounts and listed their age as 13, the youngest age users can log into the platform. Then they mimicked who they referred to as incels, or involuntarily celibates, which is an online community of young men who formed a bond around their lack of sexual success with women, according to Vice News. Now, I will say again, Vice promoted this as an extremist ideology. Like I shouldn't say promoted, but they portrayed the incel phenomenon as a culture that is extremist and misogynistic. But what the researchers had found here is if TikTok thinks you're an incel, it tells you to commit suicide. That's basically their conclusion.
Sick. That is sick.
Right?
Oh my god.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, there's a lot of pictures scrolling here. Minutes later, the researchers found that after viewing just 10 videos having to do with incel-related topics, the TikTok account's For You page were all filled with similar content, which is pretty normal. This is basically social media 101. You watch a certain type of content, you get more of that type of content. One test account was shown a video that featured a clip of let's see if I can pronounce this guy's name. Jake
Gyllenhaal.
Okay, it's Soft G. Gyllenhaal.
Yes.
Okay. Whose films have reportedly been popular among the incel community. And in the video, the actor was seen with a rifle in his mouth saying, shoot me in the fucking face. Now that's not necessarily about suicide. That could be a joke, right? But the video also concluded with the text, which read, "Get shot or see her with someone else." Although the majority of the commenters were in support of the suggested suicide, or additionally, the majority of the commenters were in support of the suggested suicide. Other commenters lamented about their loneliness, with many saying they felt dead inside. One commenter even suggested his own suicide within the next few hours. So now I have a question for anybody in the any listeners who are TikTokers. If I'm on Twitter and somebody says to me that they're going to commit suicide, if I'm taking it seriously and I have no other way to get in touch with them or intervene, basically, Twitter has a system for that. Does TikTok have a system for that? Because I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't use the thing. I don't even know what the user interface looks like, but
Yeah.
Jeez. You know, being in support of suicide, these people are assholes. Those people making those comments,
Yeah.
they're not saying, yeah, I think this is a good idea, so let's promote this to other people. They're just being fucking dicks. You know? And, I don't.
It's like the people that see somebody at the top of a tall building and yell jump. Like, don't do
Yeah.
that, right? It's not it. They will. Um, but with this part of this article is why I've had my doubts about it, because this sounds like dark humor to me. The video sounds like dark humor to me. I don't think that this guy is specifically suggesting people should kill themselves or that he's going to do it. But once you start like with this video, according to, and this isn't the only article I've seen about this, there's been several articles about this, you end up with more and more serious ones where the discussion is less and less humorous and more serious about suicide and talking about methods and stuff like that. And that's kind of terrifying. If you are a parent, my suggestion is the same as always. Don't let your kids be on the internet alone.
No.
If your child is 13 years old, they shouldn't have a phone yet of their own. If they do have a phone yet, you should be able to see everything that's on it. And their computer should be in a public part of the house. They should not be spending all their time alone in their room. And like, that's just common sense. It goes on. Let's see. And you said it's soft G. Jake Gyllenhaal clip. The Jake Gyllenhaal clip, which has since been deleted, had garnered over 440,000 likes. Which, you know, that again, if it was a joke, that's gonna happen. Over 2.1 million views, 7,000 comments, more than 11,000 shares. 10 minutes and a few clicks on TikTok is all that's needed to fall into the rabbit hole of some of the darkest and most harmful content online. Man Hamid, Echo campaigner and co-author of the research, told Vice News. Now, Vice News took this and ran with it and called all of the incel content extremist. So there you go. This is another part that kind of doesn't resonate with me here. The algorithm forces you into a spiral of depression, hopelessness, and self-harm, and it's terribly difficult to get out of that spiral once the algorithm thinks it knows what you want to see, Hammond added. It's extremely alarming to see how easy it is for children to fall into that spiral. So I haven't spent any time on TikTok, but I have watched other people do it because I have coworkers who do that instead of working. And
you too?
Yeah, it has a search bar, so I can't agree with force either. The algorithm suggests a spiral of depression, helplessness, and self-harm that you can search your way out of, but it depends on the person. And again, this is not in defense of TikTok. It's in defense of algorithms and how they work. And I mean, maybe social media would be better without them altogether. Because I mean, you can search out what you want to see. I can decide what I want to see. I follow who I want to follow, and then I want to hear from those people, right? But it's not quite the trap that people are claiming it is. At the same time, the fact that this can happen is, again, evidence that you should be keeping track of what your kids are watching. And if your kid has a phone, it's perfectly possible for you to block the phone from downloading TikTok. Now, granted, the other issue is if you don't want your kids to see something, that's not going to stop them from seeing it.
Yeah, exactly. And they will find it. because
Yeah.
these kids are a lot smarter with technology than you think. You know, it's crazy.
Well, and unless you're
Um,
in IT, these kids are a lot smarter with technology than you.
mm-hmm, absolutely. You
But
know, just like reading that last paragraph, I guess it's more like a sentence, but you know, I don't know. I don't know about you, but I couldn't sit there and watch all these depressing, sad videos about, how everything sucks and the world is shit, and maybe I just shouldn't be like that. That's not what that would make. I don't know. It doesn't
yeah, that
make me
would.
feel good. Like I want to watch something that's gonna make me laugh, or not how it's all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
But I understand I understand the attraction to it if you are already in that frame of mind,
Yeah. Well, and that's
and
that's the thing.
I think it says a lot about how many people are actually depressed, and this is what they're doing. I guess I'm assuming, yeah, if you're not loving yourself, if you're not liking the way your life is going, then yeah, watching other people go through it too, it's almost like commiserating. Um, but it just I don't like
Yeah.
the idea of making suicide seem like an option. That's not the message that should be being sent there, but I think that's what's happening.
What I'm seeing in this is a pattern of concern over things that kids can have access to, right? And there's legitimate concern, particularly again, like, not to dismiss girls' risk of suicide, because girls are very suggestible. So,
Hmm.
like, say you're a dad, um, you want to protect your kids from this situation. The first thing that I would do if I was a dad with a daughter who I thought was going to be on TikTok, and you know, you can tell your kids don't use TikTok. Like, that's gonna work if your kids obey you all the time. But I mean, all the scary movies I wasn't allowed to watch, we just went over to my friend Kenny's house and watched them.
Yeah.
So I had nightmares about The Exorcist for years after my parents told me not to watch The Exorcist, and I went over and watched it at Kenny's house. So yeah, that was like, no, you just don't you don't trust that if you say to your kids, "Don't do this; it's dangerous," that they're not going to do it. You also have to teach them to be prepared to handle what they see. So, like I said, I had nightmares about The Exorcist, but um, my parents had also taken me to church. I had a religious upbringing. I knew what was what in that movie. I knew it was just a movie, and magic isn't real and stuff. But I also knew that it wasn't going to happen to me, because I wasn't going to get into the things that a kid would need to get possessed, according to possession lore. Um, and it doesn't really matter whether you're religious or not. That context matters, in that you can do the same thing with regard to TikTok and suicide, where you instill in your kids a tendency to come talk to you about their problems. And if your kids have a tendency to not do that, like autistic kids don't necessarily want to go talk to mom and dad about how they're feeling.
Hmm.
Like, and we hide things that we really shouldn't hide, and people get away with doing awful stuff to us when we're growing up because of it, because we don't tell anybody, right?
Right.
But you can also instill a strength in your kids, get them to, train them to understand that just because somebody says something about them doesn't mean it's true. That just because they see a description of a set of problems doesn't mean that's all the information. Just because they see a pattern of behavior in their peers doesn't mean they should be imitating it. And if something is dark and ugly and makes them feel bad, then they should counter it with something that is bright and joyful and makes them feel better. And that it's an effort that they need to put forth. Heck, there was a point in time when I was on Prozac where, like, I had suicidal ideation from about 12, 13 years old until I was in my mid-20s. But there was a time when I was on Prozac where I also lost all fear of consequences, like any consequences to me or anything. My only concern was I would be sad if I knew it affected the people who loved me badly, and I had a moral obligation to live. And it was that moral obligation that my parents instilled in me that prevented most of the attempts that I thought about. That really was... So when you teach your kids about life and living and dealing with exposure to information that can make them suicidal or make them depressed or make them angry, make them have violent impulses or anything like that, you have to talk to them about the morality and the ethics of acting on those impulses. Because that self-control is what's going to be their last resort to guard against the action that can't be taken back, whether it's acting against themselves or acting against another person. And with regard to girls, if I was a dad raising a daughter, looking at how social media works, my first thing to teach her would be to value herself beyond what other people think of her and how other people treat her, so that she's not... her whole self-image isn't relying on her physical appearance and her social interactions online and stuff like that. With regard to a boy, you're looking at a whole set of other issues. And you're also looking at he's been bombarded his whole life with messages about being second to girls, being... he has to prove that he has a reason to exist. He has to earn his place in the world. So his self-esteem needs to be based on more than just, are you useful to other people? You know, you kind of have to raise your boys to understand that being human beings makes them important and valuable and loved, right? And wanted and cared about, even if it isn't by girls. And so it's one of those, you really can't just put them in front of the television or the computer or the phone or whatever and expect things to be okay. You know, you have to give them every bit of strength that you possibly can. So that when they face this kind of stuff, if they go down a spiral of video after video of somebody talking about how great it would be to kill themselves, they're sort of inoculated against having it convince them that this is a fabulous idea for themselves.
Yeah, and the, like, I don't know if irony is the right term to use here, but you know, if their parents maybe paid more attention and cared a little bit more and didn't let them waste fucking time on this stupid shit, maybe they wouldn't be so suicidal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing. Your kid isn't going to spend all of their time on TikTok if they're washing dishes with you or mowing the lawn with you. They're going to have some time that they're not spending on TikTok if they're playing pitch and catch with a baseball and a glove with you, or playing Clue, tabletop Clue. Get your kid involved in one of those games like What Words with Friends or whatever people are playing together on their phones. and send your kid memes.
Mm-hmm.
Just stupid cat memes. Like, seriously, it's something that interrupts that cycle, and that's something else. About the time I was, well, actually, when I hit 27 and I got pregnant and I went off the Prozac, and you go into withdrawal from Prozac, by the way, when you go off of it. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Honestly, was getting pregnant and going off of all of the multitude of drugs that doctors had me on. Because I didn't want anything to happen to the baby, so I just quit taking everything. It was like, nope, all these chemicals, not going into the baby. But it hit me that, part of what I was drugged for was depression, so I had to do something about that. And I switched my method of treatment from chemicals to the Three Stooges, the Marx Brothers, Weird Al Yankovic's music, Ray Stevens, just anything that made me laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There was no such thing as I Can Has Cheeseburger. Right? That hadn't happened yet. There weren't memes yet. But that kind of thing, there's a really weird, interesting effect that happens. You're going along and you're having absolute shit go through your head, right? And you see something that hits your funny bone. It's like somebody hit an interrupt button, and you have this space and time where you're like, wait a minute, what happened to all the shit? And the more you do it over and over again, where you hit the interrupt button, where the shit's going through your head, it starts to become a reset button, and you sort of start reprogramming your mood center, I guess, in your brain, and it does lift you up, especially if you do it consistently and frequently, and it works. It's not a cure-all for people who have serious, profound chemical imbalances that cause depression, but it's a great interrupter for if you've just gotten into a holding pattern of melancholy and suicidal ideation, that it actually can pull you out of that, believe it or not. But on with the article. So this says it forces you into this spiral. This is why I object to the word force. You can choose, and you can help someone else choose to get out of that spiral. But it is bad that an algorithm would promote that. TikTok, which has replaced Instagram and Facebook as the de facto social media platform for teenagers in the United States, is known for pushing content harmful to children and young adults, which in some cases even result in injury and death. Earlier this month, the University of Massachusetts had to warn its students about a new drinking trend on TikTok, which resulted in 28 ambulances being called to off-campus parties in the area. The trend involves students creating a blackout rage gallon of alcohol, flavoring, and other ingredients.
Ooh.
I'm assuming they're drinking this, and it actually just sounds like a hairy buffalo. Hairy buffalo is just basically grog. Grog is the leftover of all the other alcohol. There's always been a name for this. But again, you get back into, you have to teach your kids about this before they go to college. Right? By the time my kids were 12, they had all heard the phrase alcohol poisoning. They knew what it was. They knew why it happened. They knew how it happened.
Mm-hmm. Right?
You teach your kids that because it's going to happen if you don't.
Right. I think it's just like, teaching them about fire and the dangers, the hazards of the hot stove. You don't touch the hot stove. But
yeah,
it seems so logical, but so many parents don't do it. they think that their child is never going to do it. It's not my child. We'll just keep them away from it, right? If they don't see it, then they'll never do it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
like then,
you don't
swear,
say.
Parents are so delusional sometimes about what their kids are up to. If my aunts knew some of the things that some of my cousins have been up to, I think they would rethink their parenting style. But it's a little too late for that now. However,
yeah. Well, okay, so I now I have to tell the story about the fart in the bedroom. This is. Sorry, guys. So this is not a new story. I think I've told it before. But so when I was a little kid, my mom was really strict about language. So the part in the bedroom story starts with the doll story. My mom she sewed. She had a big steamer trunk full of fabric. And she had gotten into the trunk to get something out, and the lid closed on her arm. She's like, shit! And that was it. I was like maybe 2 years old, and so I'm playing on that trunk later on. Dad comes home from work, and I turned and dropped my doll on the floor, and I went, shit! Because I heard my mom say it. My dad's like, she didn't hear that from me. And so my mom went ballistic on strictness, like you can't use any cuss words or anything in the house. But I mean, she went way overboard. So my brother and I got into elementary school without knowing what a fart was. Seriously. And I repeated everything. So one evening, you just have to know that part, right? And I think I was like 5, 6, kindergarten age. It hit us. We'd gotten old enough to think about it. Mom and Dad could come into our rooms anytime they wanted to, and we had to knock before we went into theirs, and it wasn't fair. And we decided this was a big deal, right? So we went out to the living room where they're watching TV and just demanded to know why they didn't knock when they came into our rooms, but they had to have a knock before we went into theirs, me and my brother. And now I must have been the instigator here, because when I was 6, he was 4, and I don't think he thought of that on his own at 4. But my dad, he was kind of a funny guy in terms of, like, if you pushed him, he would push back a little, and it was just he leans forward in his chair and he goes, "There's a fart in the bedroom. You want to go smell it?" And my mom immediately, "Oh my God, you can't say that," and they begin a conversation of whether fart is a bad word or not. And we wandered off because we took that as an invitation, and we went and we spent half an hour searching my parents' bedroom for the fart. And we looked everywhere, looked under the bed, looked in all the dresser drawers, looked in the side table drawers. Open the closet door, there's a shotgun. Close the closet door immediately. And the reason that we closed the closet door immediately was that we had been taught in no uncertain terms. That's a dangerous tool. You're not allowed to touch it. You don't know how to use it yet. It doesn't belong to you. Leave it alone. And we were explained, in no uncertain terms, we were explained to that we could accidentally hurt ourselves or somebody else really badly with that very dangerous tool. And if we disobeyed in terms of this particular item, there would be absolute hell to pay. All kinds of absolute hell to pay. This was Mom's gun. Dad wasn't a shooter. Mom, Mom was a great shot. And Mom, you didn't mess with her, right? You did not want to catch hell from my mother at all. My mother was an English teacher. You never want to catch hell from an English teacher. Period. Exclamation point, and all the other punctuation.
She will read you the riot act.
Yes.
Literally.
Yes. My mom could tear you 1,000 new orifices without uttering a single impolite word. And by the time you were done, you knew what you had done wrong and you were never going to do it again, right? So we stayed away from the whole closet because the gun was in there. And then we spent the whole rest of the half hour thinking they hid the fart in the closet with the gun. And we're just, trolling us because we couldn't look in there because it was in there.
How big is this thing?
We didn't know what it was, so. But yeah, so after about a half hour, we went back out, told my parents we couldn't find the fart, and they just about died laughing at us, right? But, like, my mom and me both had asthma. I got it, genetically down through her line of the family and everything, and she sounded like she was dying. They decided we were old enough to have the right to knock on the door to our rooms before before they entered after that because of the whole situation. And we learned what a fart was after they were able to stop laughing too hard to explain. But the most important thing out of this is that even though we were in the moment being rebellious, that we confronted our parents about something, that we went into their room without real permission and everything, like, we still didn't touch the gun because they had worked very hard to instill in us that you don't do that. It's not yours. You don't mess with it. It's dangerous. You can hurt yourself with it. Everything we needed to know about that. Because 5 years old, 6 years old, I was too young for the older of us to learn to use it. Like, it was another few years before either of us was allowed to touch one. And then, like, we even had toy guns, and we knew the difference, right? Like, we knew with squirt guns, you don't shoot somebody in the face with it, right? So we had a full-on lesson on that. And that's how you teach your kids to deal with something like TikTok or having the potential for suicidal ideation, driving a car, getting a job, having sex, all of the things that can be dangerous, that can lead to negative consequences, that they can harm someone else with, that they can harm themselves with. You teach them the facts around it. You teach them how to handle it. You teach them how to discuss it with you. And you teach them how to assess their potential harm. And not just throw them into the water and see if they sink or swim. Mm-hmm. And alcohol, that's a big one. Nobody should get to the age of 12 without understanding what causes you to feel tipsy, what causes you to feel drunk, and how that phenomenon from alcohol progresses from feeling drunk into actual physical health problems and at a certain level stopping your heart or causing you to choke to death on your own vomit. Like, you should know that by the time you're 12. Mm-hmm. And your parents should be the one to tell you about it. Right? That's one of those. So with this TikTok trend, the black outrage gallon, and the university having to warn parents about this is happening because parents don't talk to their children like that. They don't talk about things like that. And you have the extremes there about, the fart in the bedroom happened because of the extreme end of don't talk to your children. Mm-hmm. And one of us accidentally shooting the other with mom's gun didn't happen because of the other end of it, of this is too big of a deal to not talk to the kids about this from day one. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the extreme that you need now with TikTok. If you're going to talk to your kids about, or if you're gonna deal with the fact that this exists, it needs to be something that you discuss with your kids. It should not be something that you rely on your government for.
Oh God, yeah.
So,
especially not this government. Good God.
yeah. But hopefully I brought that full circle and people understand why I talked about the fart in the bedroom and the gun and all that. And I know we've got pro and anti Second Amendment people here, but I think my point is very solidly made in terms of how you deal with that with your kids. But we go on. Earlier this year, 12-year-old girl in Argentina died after participating in the deadly choking challenge. Another one, like first popularized on a Chinese app. The girl's death was even filmed in a video while her classmates watched as she attempted the deadly challenge.
What? The hell is the choking challenge?
If I would hazard a guess, I would say it's probably choking you till you pass out.
I mean, it sounds like this happened in her school.
Yeah.
Her classmates watched. Like, were they in class, or were they? I mean, I guess they could.
They might have been. They might have
recess. Yeah, they could have been at. At lunch, whatever. In the bathroom.
When I was in school, we had kids. We had a girl pierce her ears with paper clips.
What?
At recess. Oh yeah. Actually, her friend pierced her ears. She didn't do it herself because she couldn't see what she was doing.
Oh my God.
First took a sewing needle and then paper clips, and like she kept the paper clips in, and the one thing that like I got them to do was I had lens cleaner for my glasses, and so we took one of my Kleenexes and we used the lens cleaner on the needle and the paper clips.
That was
and they all thought I was a wimp. But lens cleaner is mostly alcohol. So, but yeah, that was like that kind of stuff isn't new either, and it goes right back to you have to keep track of what your kids are doing. I remember in the 90s, I want to say early 90s, when I was still in college, there was a phenomenon going on of autoerotic asphyxiation. This wasn't an internet thing. This was kids learning it from other kids directly. And there was another thing that would happen. There were these phone-in chat things where like you get on a phone line and there's a bunch of other people on this phone chat where kids would just talk to a bunch of other kids. And I think a lot of this stuff spread through that kind of thing before the internet was commonly used. Because I don't think a lot of people were online back when it was just dial-up computer to computer or computer to server. So, but there was this thing going around, and some places started to report on it, and it was more of an urban thing. But kids engaging in autoerotic asphyxiation, where they would choke themselves with the cord from their curtains or something like that while masturbating, and like it's just real dumb stuff. And then they wouldn't be able to get out of it, and they would die in the middle of that, and their parents would find them. And belts, yep. And like there were other things. Girls had ribbons and bows and stuff that tied, just anything that they would use. And there were a lot of kids that died from this, and it was to the point where there were, like, if you got magazines for kids, for teenagers, there were articles about why this was a dumb idea and nobody should do it, and you can die, because parents didn't think that they would have to talk to their kids about something like that. But yeah, so this isn't, like, this is just a new forum for this kind of stuff that's being shared around. And again, if the app is promoting it using algorithms and more people are seeing it because of that, that is dangerous and that is bad. But the solution to that goes right back to mom and dad. Got to keep track of what your kids are doing online. The other examples they give: last summer, a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old in the UK allegedly died due to attempting the same TikTok challenge. Last September, the FDA warned parents of a new deadly TikTok challenge that involves children cooking chicken in NyQuil, presumably to eat.
Oh my God. Okay, this is why you have to watch what your kids are doing, because kids are fucking stupid. They're dumb. They will do the stupidest fucking thing. They are so impressionable. They are so impressionable. And they, anything for a fucking laugh. Well, oh my God.
Well, and the dumb thing about this is that was a 4chan joke.
Oh my God.
Like, I remember that, and it was just one of those, cause you know how sometimes when you're shit posting stuff, like you post doing stupid things, like that wasn't even real NyQuil. You can tell because it was real watery. And it was just one of those, look at this herder, how gross, and people are, that's not real. That's real. No, that's not real. But yeah, the FDA warning about that, that's kind of hilarious. But then again, I don't know. Maybe TikTok was presenting it as real. Maybe there were kids that were doing it. It's quite possible. But if they were, they're doing something that originally started out as somebody posting a gag video on 4chan to see if people would believe it was real. But let's see. Another TikTok challenge in 2020 involved urging users to take large doses of the allergy medicine Benadryl. Oh my God, don't do that. To induce hallucinations. Actually, you gotta that will induce death. Okay, antihistamines, no. That will dry you out, and it will knock you out, and it will induce death. You will not just, jeez. The challenge resulted in reports of teens being rushed to the hospital, in some cases dying. Just because the medicine's over the counter doesn't mean you can't you can't die from taking a shitload of it. You can kill yourself with aspirin.
Yeah.
If you take enough of it.
See, now I don't really, I'm the type of person, if I'm sick, I don't really take medicine. I don't really get headaches, but if I have, one, I don't really take Tylenol, things like that. So, but I think, now that I'm back on the East Coast, I tend to get kind of seasonal allergies. I have no idea what I'm allergic to. I just know that every once in a while I get the sniffles and, I got post-nasal drip, and it's annoying, right?
Right.
So somebody suggested that I get some Benadryl. I'm like, okay, I don't know what this stuff is. So I'm like, all right, well, I really want it to work, right? I get the extra strength, right? I had no idea, and I didn't take any. But so my neighbor saw the package and was like, "Oh, are you like, do you need to get some sleep, or like, are you like, no? What are you talking about? Oh, that stuff knocks you out." I was like, I had no idea. I had no idea. And if I had taken something like that and had to wake up the next day for work, oh, forget it. Forget it.
So, in terms of all of this, what I'm seeing here is a pattern of things that the only way that you can genuinely, like dads could genuinely protect their children from. The only way to genuinely do that is to instill your children as they are growing up with the skepticism that they're going to need in order to look at that and say, this looks like a really dumb idea, I'm not doing that. I don't need to prove to anybody that I can do that, that kind of thing. We had, when I was in elementary school, a thing for a while called the sissy test that some of the kids in the class made up, and literally it was just taking one of those pink erasers that you use for number 2 pencils and rubbing some of the skin off, giving yourself a rug burn with it
Ew.
on your arm or your hand. And so I got fed up with it because it was just so stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this doesn't prove that you're tough. This proves that you're a wimp. And the guys are all looking at me like, how? And I'm like, look, y'all are out there beating the hell out of each other in the grass at recess, playing tackle football. There isn't a single guy in this classroom that is not tough, okay? But if you guys are so wimpy that you have to do this to prove yourselves because somebody might make fun of you if you don't, then you're all a bunch of wussy-ass pieces of crap. Because you don't have the strength to stand up to somebody who tells you something that's a bad idea. And that kind of ended the sissy test. Like, the next day, nobody was doing it. I made fun of them for being too wimpy to tell their friends no, and it worked. And that was the end of that. But that's what this is. Every single one of these items is the sissy test. Right? And what you teach your kids is that if you are truly strong, if you are, better than this, then you don't have to be swayed by, like, a bunch of kids going, what, are you afraid to do it? Are you afraid to do it?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not a matter of afraid or not. I'm not stupid enough to do it.
Right.
Anybody that does this is stupid. Are you stupid? Why are you doing it? You just turn that around. And dads are good at that. Like, my dad is the one that instilled that in me. Like, if everybody else was going to jump off of a bridge, would you do it? That kind of the dad lecture logic. And it works. But what is the solution that is being proposed to all of this? Because you look at what's going on, the most insidious thing that we read about in this article is the promotion of depression and suicide directly to incels, who are the most vulnerable people in terms of that, because they are already in a dark place. They're already feeling sad. They're already feeling unwanted. They're already feeling depressed. And then they get content that makes them feel worthless and more sad and more depressed and more suicidal. So what does the state think that we need to do about this? Now, they're calling it a TikTok ban, but it's not going to, actually ban TikTok. And personally, I don't think TikTok should be banned. I don't agree with banning applications. And Lauren, we're on the second link now. This is the EFF.org link.
Yep, just open.
But my logic on banning applications is this. Everybody knows how to use a VPN by the time they're 12 now, right? So you ban an application, they're going to get around it. You can criminalize using a VPN to get around that ban, but it's not going to stop people. They're just also going to use other means of disguising what they're doing on top of that one VPN. And again, anybody that's ever been on 4chan knows that you cannot hide content on the internet. Right? You can prevent normies from finding it, and you might be able to prevent law enforcement from finding it. But if it's online, there are people who can find it. And the younger the set of people looking for it is, the more of them can find it, down to a certain point. Like, obviously, if they can't read and type and get online yet, no. But early adolescents, like, yeah, they're going to find everything. So don't ban applications. Like, that's bullshit. Now, the other thing that they're talking about with TikTok is it being malware, and that's valid. It is absolutely malware. Its primary function is to be malware. Its secondary function is to use cutesy little videos to get you to use the site so that it can steal your information. So what should they do? Pass a law, in my opinion. My suggestion, right? First of all, clearly and explicitly define what malware is. there are good examples of that already on IT sites, and EFF has one, and that's available. So you clearly and explicitly define what malware is and what it does, and then you criminalize that. Criminalize the creation, distribution, and maintenance of any app that has that as its primary function, and then just shields it with an innocent secondary function that is meant to lure people in to use the app so that they can have their information stolen, right? So, for instance, something that has a primary function of editing or enhancing self-portraits for profile photos, which is, like, there's a shitload of those now on like Google Apps for your phone because girls are vain. But so let's say you have an app that's the stated primary purpose, but its real primary purpose is that it uses your device's microphone or your phone camera to spy on the user for unrelated information, like conversations taking place near the device when the app isn't being used, or getting your credit card numbers and your social security number to use to steal your ID, right? So if you can prove that an app is doing that, then if it has American administrators, they can be held liable under the law. That's what the law needs to focus on, right? Make it so that if they're doing that, that's criminal. The people within the company that are making the app that could go to jail. They could be fined. They could be liable for civil penalties. That would handle that, right? And TikTok USA would have to be compliant, right? They would have to ensure that TikTok is compliant, or cease operations, or the people that work for TikTok USA could go to jail for stealing people's data. Now, when it comes to promoting this other stuff, that I would say they should have to be open about what they're doing. If they're using an algorithm to determine what the viewer sees, they should have to disclose that publicly. And if the algorithm promotes based on what people are looking at, they should have to disclose that publicly. And it's actually valuable to the American public if they have that disclosure, to let these apps do these things and then have that disclosure rather than ban the app altogether. Because if that disclosure reveals that, hey, the reason teenagers in the United States are all watching suicide videos is because teenagers in the United States are looking for suicide videos, then we know as parents in the United States that, hey, we have a serious problem with our teenagers that has to be addressed. And if it turns out that actually it's the site promoting it, then that can be remedied through, again, if you have to, litigation, or simply one-on-one parenting with your kids. But what we are getting from the government is this. With that preface, we're getting the Broad Vague Restrict Act is a dangerous substitute for comprehensive data privacy legislation. This is from the Electronic Freedom Foundation, and their main thing they're about is keeping an open, free, uncensored, and with as little restriction as possible internet that allows free communication between individuals and doesn't prevent the flow of information between individuals. So they're almost like the ANCAPs of internet freedom. They're very libertarian about their views on everything. So as we get down into the article, the recently introduced Restrict Act, this is Senate Bill 686, introduced by Senators Warner and Thune, rightfully is causing a lot of concern. This bill is being called a TikTok ban, but it's more complicated than that. As we wrote in our initial review of the bill, the Restrict Act would authorize the executive branch to block transactions and holdings of foreign adversaries that involve information and communication technology and create undue or unacceptable risk to national security and more.
Yeah. Again, when they pass these bills, just like the Patriot Act, it's you take the best meaning of that word and you reverse everything about it, and that's exactly what they're trying to push. It's crazy. So they're just giving the government more access to your data, but they're calling it the Restrict Act. No. And this has, and I know that it does have implications in the crypto world for cryptocurrency. I don't really understand all of the intricacies with it, but this thing is just not good at all. In the most basic way of saying it, it is nothing that anybody should be signing on to. And so there was a Twitter space that they did a couple of days ago about this, and there were some I don't know if they were legislators. I don't know if one was. There are people who know about our legal system, and they're saying, oh well, it's not that bad, and it's just not, it's not. And everyone who got up to speak was just giving these people the riot act about this. You can't say that it's not that bad. It had, just read it. It's anyway, I'm sorry to derail this whole thing. We can go into the horrors that this thing.
It's fair though, going into the horrors. It's one of the big problems is that like this law is half definitions. So going in and reading the law itself, like you get clear down to I think Section 3 before you start actually getting into the nitty gritty of the law itself. The thing that is one of the things that is problematic with it though is there's some vagueness to some of its definitions, and in that it doesn't just necessarily address, like it would be one thing if we're talking about somebody breaks into a government site and gets all the information about our weapons that our military uses and sends that to China. Like we've already got laws against that, right? But this would basically say if TikTok published a video disclosing all that information to the world, it would be illegal too. Well, that's already illegal. So, and then it kind of creates a situation where any company, any company that has any kind of applications you can use online that are owned, by an entity in a foreign country that we're not friendly with, can be in trouble because of this. But EFF goes on. Like basically, this law says if our government defines something as a national security threat, they can control it. That's all they have to do. We've explained our opposition to the Restrict Act and urged everyone who agrees to take action against it, but we've also been asked to address some of the concerns raised by others, so we do that here in this post. At its core, the Restrict Act would exempt certain information services from the federal statute known as the Bierman Amendments, which protects the free flow of information in and out of the United States and supports the fundamental freedom of expression and human rights concerns. Restrict would give more power to the executive branch to remove many of the common sense restrictions that exist under the Foreign Intelligence Services Act, FISA, and the aforementioned Bierman Amendments. But S686 would do a lot more.
So the executive branch, if anyone isn't paying
Biden.
attention here, is Joe fucking Biden.
Right.
He gets to make the fucking rules here. This guy who can't remember what the fuck he ate last night for dinner.
And before we go on to actually this next part, for people who don't understand what your FISA protections are, right? The Foreign Intelligence Services Act protects American citizens against certain ways of being spied on by the federal government in your electronic transactions. So your email to other people, your phone calls, your text messages, your any kind of transactions like that, it's considered an illegal search or seizure of your information. If they take that without some sort of approval from the judge in the FISA court. And I don't know if people have paid attention to the whole Trump-Russia conspiracy thing and what was going on there, but one of the big violations that took place there was the supposed the dossier that had like the supposed P-tape and all that other stuff. Like that was the people on Twitter yelling about the P-tape. The P-tape is real. The P-tape is real. And the P-tape never existed, right? But all of that, like the idea that Trump was compromised by Russia and all of the process crimes that came out of that were all predicated on a lie told to the judge in the FISA court to get the warrant to do that spying. And so our country literally wasted years of spying and a huge amount of funding to go after Trump and his compatriots on that, and got nothing because it was fake, right?
Yeah.
And
I gotta there's two things I want to know. One, I want to know what idiot came up with that. Like what? I know. We'll
someone
tell
in the
people.
FBI.
Yeah, he got hookers to pee on a bed or whatever the fucking story was. It's so ridiculous. It's so out there. I don't know how anybody, let alone a judge, thought that it was legitimate enough to actually, be investigated. It blows my mind. But anyway.
Right. So FISA's already vulnerable because if the government wants to violate your Fourth Amendment rights, they just lie to the court. Like that's been proved by this case, right? But technically, you do have those protections. Technically, and technically, it's supposed to be a violation of your constitutional rights if they just spy on you, if they just wiretap you, if they just go through your business records on the assumption that you are a foreign agent. But yeah, so you're already vulnerable there. This actually weakens that already weak protection. Right. That's what that's about. So I want to actually, before I go any further on this. Yeah, maybe I don't know if I want to get into the whole thing. But one of the things that this law does is it gives it basically gives the government carte blanche to decide what information is dangerous for you to have and share. It it's not subjected to any kind of checks and balances. So it removes the checks and balances from the government's ability to spy on you altogether, right?
Yeah. There was a little bit of encouraging news that came out of that Twitter Spaces. I don't know if you know the Twitter user. His name is he goes by Mario, but he knows someone that is friends with Elon. He has Elon on his Twitter Spaces, and they've gone through. Yeah, like they went through the Twitter files. Every time this guy goes on a Twitter Space, it's got thousands upon thousands of listeners. But there was someone who spoke and said, they've fucking cat, get off of me, bitch. She just scratched me again. Aww. Fucking whore. Anyway, they were saying that, that people have been talking to these senators. I guess that's who would be the one to sign on to these bills, and convincing them that, really explaining to them how this is really a bad thing. And some of them are rescinding their I guess they're revoking their signatures from the petition from the bill. So that's good. We need people to really press our legislators, the Senate, our senators.
Yeah.
Let them know that this is not good. We don't approve it. Have you really read this bill? Do you understand what it's going to do and who's going to be able to wield that power? And I think what a lot of these, because it's even bipartisan, there's Republican support for this bill as well.
Yep, and clearly, some of them, the bill that they signed on to support is not the bill that's under discussion now, and they didn't know it. Right. Which is really disturbing, because that means that they're signing on for things and then not tracking what happens with them after they sign on. They're not reading the changes to it. And so, like, FISA was bad enough because it's intended... Its stated purpose, I can't call it its intent, its stated purpose was to determine when and how the U.S. government should be able to determine that a citizen of the United States is acting as a foreign agent and spy on them. What it does is give the government the power to use the allegation that a citizen of the United States is acting as a foreign agent without proving that that's true in order to spy on them. And what it did in the case of President Trump was allow the previous administration, the Obama administration, once Trump got elected, or it looked like he was going to be elected in 2016, to start spying on him for purposes of criminalizing the next administration and getting rid of them, because it's not the administration that the bureaucracy wanted to have in place.
Right.
And if they can do that to each other, if politicians can do that to each other, and they use it on each other, and they're very public about it, then imagine what they would do to ordinary citizens whose activism might be challenging their way of doing things. For instance, if I'm right about the malice behind the legislative attack on paternity rights and paternal custody, so I think that's intended to weaken our country and weaken families, to weaken our youth against suggestibility, to make them more obedient to the state, and so on. Right? So if that's the way it is, and I'm on YouTube and a gazillion other platforms talking about how important fatherhood is and how important fathers' rights are and how fathers protect their kids against things like the phenomena that Breitbart was talking about with regard to TikTok, then why wouldn't they use that on me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? obviously, like me talking about, yes, TikTok is insidious and terrible and I hate it and I think it should disappear from the world altogether, but I don't trust my government to be the determining factor in that. If my kids were teenagers, I would be interacting with them. I've even talked to my adult kids a little bit about TikTok, because although my older kids are both kind of inoculated against it, my son is very social online. I ended up talking to him about it and everything, just because I didn't know what information he had. And just because your kids are adults doesn't mean you're done engaging with them on wisdom and learning and stuff like that, right? But for all of us, those of us that advocate, for instance, against selective service in the United States, that's a major government interest. Being able to activate thousands of young men and force them to go into the military and force them to go to war, that's something that our government wouldn't want to give up. So again, you talk about that in a time of conflict. Sure, they might decide that you might be a foreign adversary, and maybe they should have a right to spy on you and look for information that might be slightly incriminating, or that they could twist to become incriminating, or maybe, they could do what the FBI's been doing for the last few years. See if you're vulnerable, suggestible, or if they can get an agent into your social group and start twisting the things that you say and do into something that might become criminal. So this is all very dangerous. And the Restrict Act is like if you took the FISA Act that allows the government to spy on you electronically in ways that normally would be considered to violate your Fourth Amendment rights if they just decide that you're a foreign agent, and they have to prove it, and it takes that bit about having to prove it and throws it in the trash.
Right. Right, and it's all up to Biden's discretion. He's the one that gets to pull the fucking. He can change the rules as he sees fit. I don't know how anyone who really understands what this thing does would sign on to it and support it. And to the people who do. To the people who have read it and do understand what it means, and you signed on to it anyway, wait until that executive branch, there's someone in there that you don't like.
Yeah.
Because guess what? 2024 is a coming, and the Trump train is still rolling. I don't care about your stupid little fucking indictments. It really doesn't matter. I think enough of the people who were maybe fence sitters are really starting to understand that something is really wrong here and we've got to change course. But I don't see who else the Republicans are going to put up with Trump to go against him. I just don't. I can't imagine it happening. But let's see. The Democrats have no one. Their playing field is looking pretty slim. They've got no pinch hitters, and it's I don't know. But again, be careful what you wish for, because when it comes around and bites you in the ass, it's that you deserve it.
Well, and we're getting to the point now where we're running out of people that we can actually look at as potential trustworthy. Like who's going to run after, who's going to run in 2028. So if Trump wins or loses in 2024, that's either way, he's done. It's going to be the end of his political career. If he wins, he'll be president for 4 years, and then he's done. If he loses, he's not going to win the next time or the next time after that. He's just done, right? And so you're looking at either we go back to establishment candidates, or we look at other parties. Look at Tulsi Gabbard, look at other libertarians, look at, who else is talking. There's things I like about Ron DeSantis, and there's things I don't like about Ron DeSantis. But I can't say there's anything that I like about any Democrats. People talking about Carrie Lake, she's interesting. I have a litmus test for any female running for the office of president, and so Tulsi Gabbard and Carrie Lake, they would have to come out when their party starts calling the other party misogynist for criticizing them and say, don't do that. I'm a candidate, not a woman. Treat me like a candidate. And if one of them does that, then I'm open to looking at them as a candidate. It doesn't mean they have my vote. It means they have my consideration. And they don't get it if they don't do that, unless they run against somebody who is so bad that we can't risk that other person getting in, right? Or they run against another woman, and then we don't really have a choice. We have to consider, if it's a woman against a woman, we're stuck.
Yeah.
But the woman that says don't treat me like a woman, treat me like a candidate, is going to be the first person to get my consideration.
Yeah, but that's exactly why the one who does say that probably wouldn't get voted in, because you say that, and I think you lose a bulk of the female voters.
Yeah, you might. I'm sick and tired of hearing misogyny treated like a political issue. Misogyny is almost non-existent in the world. We live in a gynocentric world, so it's bullshit for women to run around crying misogyny all the time. And we are the focus, the main underlying focus of almost every form of legislation there is. It's all about protecting women and children. It's all about protecting the environment that we live in. It's all about protecting the not just the nature environment, but the safety environment. It's all about safety nets and feeling safe, and rather than being safe. It's all about women's sensibilities and what constitutes, all the obscenities laws are based on women's sensibilities. All the blue laws are based on women's sensibilities. Anybody that wants to tell me that our system is anything but gynocentric has a lot of persuading to do. Right? And if you're going to try to tell me it's misogynistic, you really, really have your work cut out for you. So I'm really, you lose me if a candidate starts spouting, well, these people criticizing me are just doing it because I'm a woman. Fuck off with that shit. I want to hear what your actual position is on how do we handle the controversy among the people of the United States over the draft, and the fact that it is still gendered in a country where we have deemed that to be a violation of human rights. I don't give a flying fuck if you're a woman, and I don't care who criticizes you or how they criticize you. What's your position on that? What's your position on fathers' rights? What's your position on our education system? What do you think is going to work? Don't tell me that people can't criticize your position because you're female. Tell me what the goddamn position is, and I'll decide for myself whether I like it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this, what we're looking at with this kind of attack on the exchange of information in the United States, we're looking at legislation that would allow the guy that wrote the Violence Against Women Act to silence critics of its funding of Duluth model training in court systems by claiming that we are foreign spies trying to weaken the United States because we are attacking U.S. law.
Yeah.
Right? It essentially would allow your government to silence its critics. There you go.
And hurt them financially as well in the process.
Well, and possibly jail them. So EFF is encouraging people to contact their congressmen, their senators and congressmen about this. They have an alternative data privacy legislation, consumer data privacy legislation that they support. The EFF website is just eff.org, and you can find this on their website. Then they go on to say that it's actually unclear whether this would have any effect on TikTok. This bill is not a ban on personal use or even on a technology directly. The bill may result in a ban on TikTok because it grants the Commerce Department such broad authority. That ban may take the form of removing it from app stores or a forced sale or other mitigation measures imposed against the owners of the technologies. The Restrict Act makes use of mitigation measures that have been used under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. The bill applies to six foreign adversaries: China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Russia, and Venezuela, and could be expanded to other countries. Although the Venezuela.
How did they get on that list?
There's a lot going on there. Venezuela collapsed, and so right now there's a lot of chaos there, and there is in a collapsed country with a shitload of chaos. That creates a situation where Venezuela could have, in addition to its own criminal organizations and its own government, current government potentially being an adversary of the United States, it could also be a pathway for the other 5 countries mentioned to get through to the United States if we're not closed off to.
Okay. I see. Yeah.
Because Venezuela did collapse a few years ago.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's utter chaos. But I think sometimes the United States also just declares countries enemies if we don't control their government.
Yeah.
We unfortunately do control some other countries' governments, which we shouldn't.
No.
But in any case, this goes on to say it can be expanded to other countries. Let's see. It can be expanded. It can be applied to other companies. Headquarters is in those companies. Senator Warner, if I remember right, we're talking about Pocahontas here. Identified those companies
as Warren.
The Hills. Okay, you're right. Warner, not Warren.
Yeah.
But yeah, the bill's co-sponsor has identified those companies as the bill's primary targets. So essentially, they're specifying our Congress is literally taking action specifically against companies. So
I know Huawei is a Chinese company, but I don't know what they do. I think it's just technology. I'm not sure exactly what their like business model is. And Kaspersky, I've never heard of them before. That sounds like that might be Russian. Based on the list that they have here.
Yeah.
So, anything Russia bad. No. Stupid.
Yep. So basically this explains it's currently described as targeting a set of nations and some businesses in those nations. It can be expanded. It isn't limited to that. And it instead of naming purposes, it names nations and businesses, which to me is a problem. I would say purposes should be the thing that the law should address. You outlaw murder. You don't outlaw murder only, for instance, when the mafia does it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but it's okay to shoot your neighbor as long as you're not part of the mafia. No, we don't want laws like that. That is bad. All right. So going on, as of yet, the U.S. government has not shared information that would justify a forced sale or ban of TikTok from app stores or other possible mitigation measures. As we've written, the government will have to demonstrate that any mitigation measure is narrowly tailored to prevent the harm it has identified. And again, like, I would say they would be better off passing a law that clearly and explicitly defines malware, and what it does targets malware being marketed as if it has a primary purpose other than being malware, and hiding its malware functions behind that primary purpose, and go from there instead of having it be targeted towards specific companies. Because if you look at, say, Facebook, Facebook takes your personally identifying information. You can buy Facebook currency and spend it. So you can hand Facebook your financial information. If you are if your identity on Facebook is challenged, they may ask for your driver's license or your other state ID. Again, personally identifying information. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at these websites taking information from people that can be used for identity theft. They can be used for blackmail. They can be used with identity theft. You can steal people's bank accounts. You can actually go after somebody's mortgage. You can go after somebody's house, and so on. But you can also take a stolen identity and use that identity to commit crimes, and then the criminal doesn't get caught. The person whose identity that really is ends up facing the music, and the criminal goes on with a new stolen identity and commits other crimes. Very much like, if somebody steals your car and commits a crime, then the cops come after you. So this is something that is not limited to TikTok, right? But they're treating it like it is, and the push against TikTok that we've been seeing has been using what we were talking about earlier, the promoted content on TikTok that is problematic, like this suicide content. And then, of course, you have on the left, they're calling any content that treats men like they're human as extremist content. That's being used to promote this, and this has absolutely nothing to do with that. Second, any lawsuit challenging a ban would be constrained in scope and the amount of discovery. So you wouldn't be able to get your evidence from the government as to what they were using to determine that you should be forced to sell your app. Like, say you create a new social media and they determine it to be this. You could be put into that situation. Discovery can lead to the release of information that helps the public learn how a law is applied and why, but this law would limit what the public could learn as well, and as the ways in which a case could proceed. So you wouldn't even know what was going on.
That's insane to me. Insane to me, especially now, because currently I'm like immersed in LawTube. These Zoom court meetings, it's just,
yeah.
Oh my God, I can sit there and watch it for hours because you learn so much about the system. And like I said, there are people in there that just say and do the craziest things because they just don't know how to operate. They don't understand decorum, right? And wow, it's insane. So it's just really kind of like the opposite of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, no, you can't see anything. You can't know anything. No, I want to see everything. I want to hear what's coming out of the defendants and the plaintiffs' mouths. I want to hear what the lawyers have to say and what they're objecting to. And yeah, this is just, it's in some ways it is named appropriately, right? It's restrictive.
Yeah. Well, and
In a lot of ways.
It doesn't restrict the government. It restricts you. Now,
Right.
this next paragraph, I'm not going to go through and read the whole paragraph, but it does highlight the vagueness of terminology in the law, that's not clearly defined, and it also points out, and this is a problem that we've talked about in conjunction with another Trump case, the over-classification of national security information. There's not a lot of standard on what gets deemed classified. And so you end up in a situation where between the vague terms and the overzealous use of classification, which is, again, at the will of the executive branch, you can be criminalized for talking about things or criticizing things that actually aren't a threat to national security at all. But going on, we're going to skip down to, could a person be punished under the law for using a VPN to access TikTok if its U.S. access is restricted? And the answer is potentially. And that's another one. So what happens if your 13-year-old, you've told your 13-year-old you can't get on TikTok, your government gets rid of TikTok using this ban, but your 13-year-old uses a VPN to access it. Does your 13-year-old now get thrown into the juvenile justice system?
Right.
Because there's a whole rabbit hole of hell for kids if that happens. Like, there are kids that get thrown into the juvenile justice system because they have done something unruly. They've run away from home, they shoplifted, they got in a fight at school, whatever. And they go from being a kid who had a problem for a minute to being a gang member. When they get out, they're part of a gang. They're expected to do specific things. They're selling drugs. They're beating people up. They're stealing from cars. They're stealing from houses. And it's because this is who they made contact with in the juvenile justice system. And now they are effectively drafted into this lifestyle, and they can't get out of it unless you move them out of that area. And not everybody can do that. Right? Not everybody can just pack up and leave without delay after their kid gets out of juvie. So that's a whole other thing. So if this is a real possibility that your 13-year-old kid could actually get convicted of a crime just for watching TikTok videos, then a TikTok ban is really bad. And what it says here is, the bill is meant to punish companies, but the law doesn't place limits on mitigation measures or bar individual user prohibitions. And the result is, as they say, troubling. What the result is would be, you can't be sure that if your 13-year-old uses a VPN to watch stupid dance videos on TikTok, that they might not be prosecuted and punished. The bill authorizes the Department of Commerce to impose mitigation measures without any restrictions on what those measures might be. Couple that with a vague enforcement provision that grants the power to broadly punish any person who evades these undefined mitigation measures, And the result is a law that could be read as criminalizing common practices like using a VPN to get a prohibited app, side-loaded installations, or using an app that was lawfully downloaded somewhere else. So that essentially creates a situation where you as a parent lose power over deeming what is or is not appropriate behavior for your kid, to the degree where your child can be punished for something that they might not even understand they're not supposed to be, that they can get into that level of trouble from. And the last thing I want to get into is they're asking, is the Restrict Act a surveillance bill that would allow the government to access your devices? Not exactly, but it is far too broad in the power that it gives to investigate potential user data. So in other words,
just say yes.
Yes. Yes, it is. So this is the NSA 2.0. Under the bill, the Commerce Secretary can demand information from any party to a transaction or holding under review or investigation. In theory, a company designated under the bill, such as TikTok, could be required to cough up user data during these investigations. There are some important confidentiality requirements protecting this data, but it could be shared with other government entities in some specific circumstances. So for people to understand this, I can't think of the name of it. Unmasking. When our government spies electronically on a spy in a foreign country that's communicating with people in the United States, or their spies in the United States, foreign spies in the United States, those communications can inadvertently include U.S. citizens who are not part of the spy ring, right? So you have, I don't know, Chinese spy speaking with Chinese American Chinese spy, and they're part of a group of friends. The Chinese American spy is part of a group of friends. So the surveillance on that Chinese American spy can target, and I say Chinese American, I don't necessarily mean someone who's a citizen, I mean someone who's here to go to college or to work. That spying can include them talking on the phone to their neighbor about a kid's birthday party. Technically, the neighbor is not supposed to be identified to law enforcement or to politicians and so on when this the spy's communications are revealed and studied and analyzed for criminal behavior and so on. It's like, well, this isn't important. It's just talking about a kid's birthday party with a neighbor. We don't need to know who the neighbor is. The neighbor is irrelevant, right? But there have been instances where unmasking has occurred, and even criminal charges have been brought against people who were not part of any of that. And that's made the news in the last few years as well. So what this is talking about, for instance, TikTok starts coughing up this user data. This bill doesn't contain protections that would prevent the government from then using all of the information that they can get from that user data to go after American citizens. And so, for instance, if TikTok is stealing personally identifying or financial information, and your kid had it on your desktop computer where you do the taxes for your home business, the government might just feel like digging into that to find out if they can accuse you, even by accident, of violating any tax laws. And tax laws are so complicated that in some instances there is no right thing to do. And so no matter what you do, even if you've paid your taxes, they can come up with something that you've done wrong.
Yeah.
So there's that. Or hell, they might go after the data from your 13-year-old on using TikTok and find out that your 17-year-old is dealing pot in a state where it's not legal, and go after them for that. So, like they can get actual legal violations too. We find another concern that others have raised to be largely misplaced. Some have read the bill as authorizing investigations into any website that has a foreign entity's pixel embedded in it. These companies would then have to produce user data to the Commerce Department. We don't share this concern because it would require interpreting the law to say that merely using a website pixel means your site is holding of a foreign adversary. The definition of holding is not that broad. So there's some things that it's protected against. But what it does do is it creates a situation where you, personally, the user, the end user, lose a lot of your Fourth Amendment protections because of this bill. And it doesn't really necessarily protect your kids against any of the things that we've just read about. Not having suicide promoted to them, not having their driver's license number stolen and their credit wrecked for their entire life, or having information get taken off of your desktop computer if they're using it on a desktop, or your laptop computer if they're using it on a laptop, tablet, or whatever that you use for your financial information. This bill doesn't protect against any of that. It just gives the government more surveillance powers that ultimately lead back to surveilling you.
Yep.
So, yeah. And we're still stuck with the situation of there is an app on your kid's phone that may be promoting suicide. So our bottom line, I think, as MRAs, is if you've got a son that watches TikTok, that uses TikTok, I should say, find out what kind of videos he's preferring. If you got a daughter that's using TikTok, find out what kind of videos she's preferring.
And posting.
And posting, yeah. Your daughter's probably putting her boobs on the internet. Just make sure your daughter knows not to put her boobs on the internet, especially if her boobs are not 18 years old yet. And by the way, you should tell your daughter if her boobs are not 18 years old yet and she puts them on the internet that she can go to jail.
Yep.
But yeah, and same with your son. No dick pics. Right? Because again, under 18, our government is so idiotic that if a child makes themselves vulnerable by sharing images of themselves, rather than just going after the person who solicited that from them, they are going after these vulnerable kids for, quote, producing illicit imagery. And rather than that leading to something like therapy and helping the kid understand, hey, this makes you vulnerable, this is dangerous, you shouldn't do it, you're going to get hurt, somebody's going to take advantage of you, they're just punishing them. But yeah. Dads, you're more important now than ever. Watch out for what your kids are doing on TikTok. Don't support this bill. This bill is not gonna protect you or your kids, and it might actually be harmful to both of you. Check out the EFF's website, and you can read more about this. They've got more articles about this, and personally, I recommend people follow them on social media as well. They're on Twitter. I think they're on Facebook. I don't do a whole lot with Facebook, but I think they're on Facebook. Familiarize yourself, because when stuff like this comes along, they are usually pretty good at breaking it down and getting people to understand what it's really all about. I got some super chats here. The earliest one that I'm aware of is Xeranx gave us $5 and said, talk about government vanishing made me think of Johnny Kemp's Just Got Paid for some reason. Yeah. Albert Nader Retro gave us $5.50 Canadian, said, in the stone age of the internet, by the time the picture loaded, you were finished, had a smoke, and taking a nap. Yeah.
Right.
You would, if a website did have images on it, you'd get it started loading up, and then you would go do something else, and then you would come back and interact with it. That's true. Let's see, we have one more here. Albert Nada Retro gave us $2.20 Canadian to nag Lauren about that email.
I've addressed it.
And then got yelled at by the whole chat.
I've addressed it. I still have not received the email, Albert. I don't know what's wrong with your internet, but it's not coming through. So I will leave that there. And we can handle this in Facebook Messenger like we've been doing. We don't have to interrupt. You don't have to get yelled at by everybody for asking me if I fucking read the email. I love you and thank you. I'm looking. I just don't see it. So try again.
Yeah. Then we have Q Brother Soulstar, whose name is absolutely fabulous. I absolutely love that name.
I love
gave
it.
us $5 and said, "Did you hear about the TikTok trend of evicting 18-year-old boys on their birthday and recording their reaction for fun?" No, but I will tell you this. If you're a parent and you have a child and you are evicting them on their 18th birthday, you were never, for 5 minutes in that child's entire life, a good parent, and you didn't deserve their love.
Oh.
God, you take being a parent as a lifelong job. Not to mean that you have to financially support your kid for their entire life. But there's not a cutoff date where you give them your full support right up until that date, and then you say, get out of here. Like, that's bullshit. And if you're doing that, you're not doing it because you love your child. Like, you're doing it, because you're an asshole. And my kids grew up and went on with their lives and did their things when they were ready. And honestly, I would have been happy to have them home longer if needed, because they're my kids.
Yeah.
And you deal with the way things are, and like my son came of age right about the time that COVID hit. Like he had started college when COVID hit, so that really threw a monkey wrench into everything. Right, and I thought, well, we're gonna have an extra few years, and that'll be cool. And then started seeing stuff about COVID being a threat to asthmatics, and he went to stay with my parents in a small community to get away from the urban area where it was a denser population. Infection was more likely to happen. And while there, decided that he wanted to take care of them. And that was it. Like, we were empty nesters. And it was like somebody ripped my heart out when I realized it. It was like, he's not coming back. I think I spent 2 whole days just breaking down crying every time I thought about it.
Aww.
But you deal with it. Like, this is the way it is. But at the same time, if your kid's going to take the time to go to university, or they're going to start work and save up for a home or save up for an apartment or something, you don't stop supporting them. Like, these are parents that deserve to get chucked into a nursing home at the first sign of infirmity. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, you kick your kid out and film it, for their reaction and brag about it. Guess what? They can do the same thing to you in a few years, only we're going to drop you off at the county home.
Yeah.
Right, and that just pisses me off. I'm sure you can hear it, but that just if you love your kids, you raise them to be self-sufficient, and you help them develop their self-sufficiency, and then you revel in their exercise of it, but it's not something that you force. It's something that you encourage and you praise. Albert Nader Retro gives us $2.20 Canadian and says, screw the chat, let them eat cake. Oh, that's terrible. Q Brother Soulstar gives us $4 and said, look up Jay Edwards. He was homeless with nothing. That's insane. An 18-year-old? That's just, like, why would you do that to your kid? Like, you cannot. I cannot even begin to. That makes me so angry.
These are people that claim they want to have kids, but they don't want to be parents, right? Having the kid and getting the attention and all of the, hullabaloo that goes along with it, right? It's all exciting, right? But eventually you realize that the day-to-day is kind of humdrum. It's not all this glitz and glamour and excitement. Oh, look at what my kid did today. My kid can read. Well, I hope so, bitch. That's what kids are supposed to do.
Right.
But it just becomes it's not as exciting as it was in the beginning. And so these people, I honestly feel that some parents feel like they're in jail, like this is a jail sentence that they have because they have to raise this kid. And that's why they celebrate when the kid actually leaves the house, is because, oh, I don't have to pay for their food or their rent, or it's so selfish.
The way you really handle having a kid, like, even if you didn't plan on it, like, say, well, you really didn't think about it ahead of time. You didn't do your due diligence like you should as a person that loved their kids before they had them, and now you're winging it as parents. You still have everything that you need on the inside to understand the value of your child and to understand the greatness of getting to see a whole person develop and who they're going to be when they get older, and to influence that and stuff. And it's little things like my kid has the same, my son has the same some of the same issues as me in terms of, like, paying attention to detail when you're making a decision. Is this a good idea or a bad idea? But at the same time, he has some strengths that I don't have, and he has some weaknesses that I don't have. So when he was growing up, and I'm watching him learn to do things and everything, and identifying that stuff, one of the things that was fun to learn about was his ability to look at how something gets put together and just figure it out and do it. And starting out, like, with he had those Bionicle toys when he was a kid, and he was like 3 or 4 years old. He wanted one, and it was one of those things with parts that are small enough that and complex enough that they're like, well, this is, I guess he was maybe 4 or 5, and it was a 7 and up toy. So I'm like, I'll be right back. Wait till I'm back, and then we'll put it together. Because I didn't figure somebody his age would be able to just, do it. And I didn't want him to get frustrated. I want him to have fun with the toy. So I ran off to the bathroom. I come back, and he has gotten out the instruction page, which has no text on it. It's just all pictures. And he looked at it and had put the device together, put the toy together by himself in 5 minutes. And I was like, all right, so we can get toys for kids that age that involve this specific skill. This is the same kid that I had to tell 27 times not to touch the hot baking sheet after I got the cookies out of the oven. But this he was really good at, right? So, and I can't criticize him about the baking sheet because I was the kid that stuck my foot in hot coals and got 3rd-degree burns. So, because I wanted to see what would happen.
I'm sorry, that's different, Mom. These are cookies. How do you expect a kid to stay away?
I know, stay away from the cookie sheet. The cookies have to sit there for 2 minutes before we can take them off.
No way. No, they're perfect. When they're hot and just melty and chewy, and
if you want your skin to be melty and chewy, then you leave the cookies alone. But
everything in life is a sacrifice, right?
Exactly. But I mean, like, that's when you go through stuff like that, you're like, okay, well, this is a strength that my kid has. How can I foster this? So you look for things that will help to foster that strength. And at the other end, the not paying attention to how hot the cookie sheet is detail. You have to also, well, all right, so this is a weakness that my kid has. How can I help him overcome it? And that's your focus. And you don't stop focusing on that at 18.
Right.
Right? So, yeah, I just, it blows my mind that parents would be like, oh, you're 18, cut off, no more, we're not here anymore for you. Like, that's bullshit. Just absolute bullshit. It's just like, and, my parents didn't do that either. Right before I got pregnant with my son, I was injured pretty badly. And, it was bad because of my Ehlers-Danlos. And I had some soft tissue damage from 2 car accidents in 8 months. I was at the time living in the city that particular year was labeled the per capita car accident capital of the United States. My fault. Should have moved somewhere else, right? But I didn't know it was that bad up there. But in any case, they brought me home, and I stayed home with my parents for quite a while until my husband and I got our living arrangements figured out so that we could actually be together and have our family together. And when my parents got old, I took care of them as best I could. Like, you take care of your family. It's what you do.
Yeah.
Unless there's something wrong with you. Or something wrong with your family. But yeah. Then we have in Rumble Rants, we have NobaFan21 gave us $1 and said, sadly, a lot of right-wing parents think their kids don't have anything like autism. The far left will recruit them to their side. So thank you, HBR, for helping as much as you can. And this is actually not just a right-wing thing. It's there are parents that are like, they have not my kid syndrome. I had a classmate when I was in elementary school that was passed on to the next class every year without being helped because his mother just fought tooth and nail. Don't flunk my kid, don't psych eval my kid, don't do any of this, don't do any of that. He was 13 before they found out that he was schizophrenic, and that and it was early onset, because this is not something that usually happens with elementary school kids, but since early elementary school, he had been having visual and auditory hallucinations. That is what was interfering with his ability to learn to read, learn to do math, sit still in the classroom, everything. His whole life was just kind of a nightmare until he got help. And part of the reason for that was because his mother didn't believe there could be anything wrong with her boy.
Yeah, I was just about to say, she sounds like she was in complete denial.
Yep. And it was, part of it is, people treat it like when you say something wrong with, they treat it as something bad about.
Yeah.
If you have symptoms of strep throat, there's something wrong with your throat right now. It's infected. And it doesn't mean your throat is immoral or that you should be rejected as a person because you have a sore throat. And if you have symptoms of schizophrenia, depression, autism, bipolar disorder, any mental health condition, it means that you are suffering from a disability. There is something wrong that you need help with. It doesn't mean you're a bad person and should be rejected as a human being or mistreated. It means you need support. Right? And like, our society really has fucked up in dealing with that. We don't support people who have mental health conditions for some reason. We treat them like outcasts. And it's not right. And that does lead a lot of parents to want to deny that their child has a mental health condition. And it is unfair to the child because the child needs support.
Right. Because they don't understand what the hell's going on with them, They don't know.
Well, and like with a behavioral disorder or with a perception disorder, anything like that, like an emotional disorder, each of the different types of support like all of that can help a child be able to engage with the world around them in a more meaningful way, and in a more healthy way, and become, a more contributing part of their community and everything. So like, yeah, it's heartbreaking when parents want to deny. Like, it makes the child's life better if you support their ability to be part of their family and part of their community and stuff, instead of denying their experiences.
Yeah.
Meredith G gave us $5 in Super Chow and said, HBR Talk 255, thanks for the thought-provoking conversation. What the government is doing with regard to proposed legislation against TikTok, which really has nothing to do with TikTok, but everything to do with social media platforms, is taking advantage of a crisis to slip in legislation, hoping no one will read the fine print.
Yes. Which is kind of like what they do with every bill.
What they always do.
Yeah.
Like, a crisis. How can we exploit this to take away people's rights?
Second verse, same as the first.
A whole lot louder and a whole lot worse. Michael Emmerich Winberg gave us a $5 super chow and said, ultimately the solution isn't trying to legislate it into oblivion, but advocacy. How unsurprising that men's rights advocates would be among the only ones realizing such a thing.
Right.
Yeah. This also won't solve the attitude people have that led to the massive growth of TikTok, and now finds itself in a feedback loop where they both amplify each other. But worry not. With TikTok banned, you'll now be incentivized to use the all-American YouTube Shorts. Buy American! Oh, God, yeah. Suddenly Provoked Thought gave us $5, a $5 super chow, and said, perhaps parents refuse to teach their children the world's dangers out of beliefs that they are protecting their children's innocence. I suspect the irony here is that children will better defend their innocence if parents equip them with knowledge of the dangers in the first place. And yeah, that is, like, if you don't tell your kids what drowning is like, they might take the risk of going into the pool before they learn how to swim. So, yeah. And that is all of our super chats, super chows, rumble rants, everything that I have here. So, with that, I will thank everybody. This was a bit of a long sausage, not super long, but a little long. It was an odd sausage in that you can recognize it as a men's issue because of the suicide factor, the right to communicate factor, the government oversight factor, because that always hits men the hardest. But it's not explicitly a men's issue or just the men's issue, because this will hit girls, this will hit female users, this will hit all of the platforms, whether the people administrating them are male or female. And, of course, fathers' rights impact primarily fathers and their kids, but mothers are better off in cooperation with fathers than they are out of cooperation with fathers, too. So it's kind of a mother's rights issue as well. So we could call this a broad sausage. And there we go. One more super chat. Josh Chasen says, there are no laws against children working the family business. 14, 16, 18, 21, 30. What's an adult? Corporal punishment. Debtor's prison. Yeah, I worked in the family business. My first job was as a I don't know what I would call it. I numbered pictures. Short version is, it was how we used to track which of our proofs, the images that we printed so people could order pictures, went to which negative. And then I went into actually taking pictures for the photo business, and then so on. Nova fan sent another Rumble rant, just popped up. No. It moved, but I don't see it. Watch it not show up. Let me reload and see. Watch it not show up until I close out the show. Like, this is annoying. I wonder how much of a delay there is on comments there.
Yeah, I like having the ability to use Rumble as an alternative to YouTube, but they really need to bone up on some of their features. Just the for the end user, it's a little bit, it's difficult. Like, if I'm watching YouTube videos and I, happen to click off or click onto something else that I didn't mean to, I can just go to my history and see the last thing that I was watching and click on that. They need more interactive kind of buttons and tools that...
Well, while you're talking about that, I reloaded and my whole chat disappeared. I didn't know that. I got no chats except for the last thing Mr. 303 said. So that's annoying. But the Rumble rant wasn't showing either. So this is...
He says in YouTube, I was making a silly joke about if pictures of Richard count as dick pics.
Oh, God. Actually, that's funny because somebody on Twitter said something about send me your dick pics. Because I get accused of being a man all the time, so I sent a picture of Dick Van Dyke, a picture of Richard Nixon. There was another actor I sent, and I can't remember, but 4 or 5 different Richards that had publicly gone by Dick at some point or another, and that pissed them off and they blocked me. So there we go. But anyway, yeah, it's not showing up. Watch it show up after the stream is over. It'll show up and I won't get to read it. But yeah, so I support the idea of using the Richard dick pic pun if it's a Richard that goes by Dick, because they don't all. But with that, like I said, thanks to everybody for listening to the Broad Odd Sausage, and Teflon Soul for the indie rock band name suggestion. Thanks Lauren for being on here to discuss this one. This one was, like I said, it was an odd one, but I think it's very important, especially with regard to the issue of things that TikTok might be promoting to your teenagers that are particularly harmful to boys. And also the demonization that we saw of incels, in regard to that. And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. Good night, all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.